Hey guys, tonight we wake up on a bamboo mat that's more mosquito wing than cushion, in a house made of sticks, sweat, and the soft sound of your neighbor vomiting into a rice basket. You're alive in the Khmer Empire, 1290 CE, give or take a decade, depending on whether the stars align or the astrologer just sneezed on his palm leaf calendar. The good news, you're not dead. The bad news, you're about to wish you were, somewhere between the leeches, the labor, and the local shaman who thinks your headache is caused by angry forest spirits. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit up, slowly. Your back crackles like dry bamboo because it is. The floor creaks under your weight. Or possibly just under the collective pressure of shared generational despair. There is no mattress, no pillow, just a straw mat woven by someone with more optimism than spinal support. You're 22, which is middle-aged. You've survived smallpox, snake bite, and a brief but memorable childhood famine. Congratulations. Your reward is this being fully responsible for hauling water, managing the rice paddies, and surviving the next monsoon season without floating into someone else's family shrine. The air is thick enough to chew. It smells like charcoal, fermented fish paste, and regret. Sweat clings to your skin before you even move. There's no fan, no window glass, just slats of bamboo, and the occasional gecko offering commentary from the ceiling. You crawl across the floor to avoid stepping on your cousin, who sleeps in the same room, along with your aunt, 2 chickens, and 1 extremely judgmental dog. Privacy. That's something reserved for kings and corpses. Outside, the jungle buzzes with a soundscape of existential dread insects, frogs, and something large enough to make you wish it wasn't real. You squint toward the horizon. The stone towers of Angkor Wat rise in the distance, majestic, divine, and completely irrelevant to your personal suffering. You live in the shadows of gods, literal ones. The king isn't just a ruler, he's a Devaraja, a god king. Which sounds glamorous until you realize it mostly involves building large monuments with your bare hands and pretending that leeches are part of the sacred experience. Historians still argue whether life for Khmer commoners was peaceful or punishing. Some sources describe thriving agriculture, irrigation systems, even festivals with music, food, and joy. Others point out that said joy came between 14-hour workdays, monsoons, and forced temple labor. A fringe detail. Sleep paralysis is interpreted as a spirit pressing on your chest. The solution: whisper apologies to your ancestors and stop sleeping on your back. Not because it works, but because blaming ghosts is easier than inventing orthopedic support. You reach for your water jar. It tastes like clay, algae, and mild bacterial ambition. You drink it anyway, because that's what survival is, compromising every instinct in the name of basic hydration. Your head aches, your stomach growls, the roosters scream, and the day hasn't even started. But you're still here, and that, for now, is enough. The sun hasn't risen yet, but your house is already steaming like a reluctant dumpling basket. You don't wake up. You slowly cook to consciousness, lying motionless in your open-air sauna of a home. Your thatched roof is doing its best, which is adorable, but it's also made of dried grass and hope, neither of which are known for insulation. There are no walls, just woven bamboo slats, excellent for airflow, and slightly less excellent for keeping out snakes. You sit up carefully, trying not to knock over the family's communal rice jar or the piglet that has chosen your left foot as a mattress. Home, sweet home, or more accurately elevated wooden box of mildew, mosquitoes, and muffled arguments. It's technically a house, sure, but it feels more like a lightly upgraded bird nest with better gossip. Everything smells like yesterday's rain and this morning's disappointment. You glance up at the roof and spot a hole that probably wasn't there last week. The monsoon did that. Or maybe a monkey. Or maybe karma. Your options for repairs include a hope it doesn't rain. B. Pray to the ancestor whose shrine is hidden under the floorboards. Or C. Tie another palm leaf to the hole and hope it doesn't attract bees this time. There is no door, only a cloth curtain that flaps lazily in the thick air, like it's just as tired of this life as you are. Bugs fly in, stay a while, then either leave or die somewhere in your bedding. The only thing keeping them out at night is your mutual agreement not to talk about it. Your bed is not a bed, it's a shared platform, polished smooth by decades of other people's backsides. You sleep shoulder to shoulder with your siblings, your cousin who coughs constantly, and your uncle who snores like a drowning elephant. There's no privacy. Unless you count the curtain you drape over your head and pretend is a personal universe. You call it bedtime. It's actually just advanced denial. Furniture. Funny word. There's a cooking pot, a cracked clay jug, one woven basket, and a wooden stool that no one sits on because it's possessed. At least, that's what your grandmother says. No one argues with her because she once cured your cousin's fever using only lime juice and shouting. At dawn, the village comes alive in waves of sound. Roosters, drums, chanting, a neighbor praying loudly to the spirits of her ancestors, and possibly yours too, just to cover all bases. The village monk passes by, barefoot, collecting rice in his alms bowl. You bow your head, not because you're devout, but because if you don't, your mother will slap the reverence back into you. Historians still debate whether Khmer peasant homes were ingenious responses to a tropical climate or simply functional misery platforms. Some praise the elevated floors that protected against flooding and snakes. Others point out that protect is a strong word when rats can still climb. A fringe tidbit: some families hang protective talismans made of chicken bones above their sleeping area to ward off evil spirits and petty neighbors. Do they work? Who knows? But they're great conversation starters, especially when the bones fall on your face at midnight. It's hot now. Your skin sticks to your cotton sandpot, which is also your blanket, towel. And when wrapped correctly, your dignity? The mosquitoes are in full breakfast mode. You swat one, miss, and accidentally slap your cousin. He grumbles. You pretend you're asleep again. Life in the Khmer Empire doesn't come with walls. It comes with open-air exposure therapy. You learn to sleep through noise, heat, bites, and the gentle horror of discovering a millipede in your ear. And yet, this is home. For you, for your family, for your ancestors. You step outside into the soupy dawn, bare feet touching the ground like you're making a personal apology to the planet. Because today, like every day, you'll leave this hut to go survive. And tonight, if the spirits allow, you'll come back to sweat all over it again. You trudge down the dirt path barefoot, because shoes are for nobility and people who enjoy dry feet. The air is thick with humidity, and the subtle terror of what you're about to do next. Relieve yourself in the river. Again, that's not just your bathwater, your dishwashing spot, and your main drinking supply. It's also the designated family toilet. Welcome to one of the most awkward public performances in the ancient world. There is no wooden shack, no privacy curtain, no polite euphemism, just you, a bend in the riverbank, and the sincere hope that nobody else is upstream with a ladle. The act is straightforward in theory squat. Do your business, rinse with river water, and pray that no snake mistakes your backside for breakfast. In practice, It's a test of courage, balance, and intestinal timing. The river is muddy, the bank slippery, and you have exactly one large leaf to function as toilet paper and/or apology note to nature. You try to pick a spot that feels secluded, but nothing is truly hidden in this village. You hear someone chanting nearby, probably a monk, or maybe your neighbor, or maybe both. At this point, spiritual enlightenment and bowel movements are becoming weirdly interchangeable. You squat with the grace of someone who's done this since childhood. Your toes dig into soft mud. The sun beats down. The insects are delighted. One lands directly on your cheek. No, not that cheek. You swat, stumble slightly, and nearly baptize yourself in questionable water. It's humbling. It's horrifying. It's Tuesday. Historians still argue whether the Khmer Empire had formal sanitation systems beyond the royal courts. Angkor Wat, after all, boasted magnificent reservoirs and hydraulic engineering, but peasant villages, not so much. You're basically a walking testimony to human resilience and gastrointestinal roulette. The nobles, of course, don't squat by rivers. They have pot-like containers, perfumed cloths, and assistants who probably pretend this doesn't happen. You have mosquitoes and a silent understanding with the nearest duck. Afterward, you clean yourself with a splash of water and whatever leaf you found that didn't give you a rash last time. There's no soap. There's no towel. You drip dry and pretend this is normal. Because it is. Because everyone's doing it. Just very awkwardly and very separately. A fringe tidbit. Some villagers hang bells on nearby trees not to mark toilet spots, but to scare off spirits while they squat. The logic being, if you're going to risk parasites and crocodiles, you might as well have ghost insurance. And then there's bathing. Yes, you bathe here too. Later. Usually in the same exact spot. You wade into the water fully clothed, modesty wrapped in soggy cotton, scrubbing your skin with sand and denial. No shampoo, no soap, just friction and faith. You pretend you're clean. You are not. The water itself is a character in your life sacred, life-giving, and mildly cursed. It nourishes your crops. It carries away your dead. It also carries bacteria, parasites, and the occasional eel with boundary issues. You remember the time a cousin caught dysentery? Or the time someone upstream dumped pig waste during festival season? You still haven't fully recovered from the memory or the infection, but what's the alternative? Dehydration. Not bathing for months? Tempting. And so, you wash, drink, poop, and pray in the same river, day after day, year after year, with no toilet paper, no hand sanitizer, and no plausible deniability. But eventually, it just becomes part of you, this blend of sacred tradition and digestive anxiety. And as you walk back up the riverbank, dripping and bitten, you realize if you can survive this, you can survive anything, even the afternoon. You sit cross-legged on the floor, stomach rumbling with the urgency of a war drum, staring at a bowl of rice that looks suspiciously like it's already been eaten once. This is breakfast. It will also be lunch. And if the frogs aren't hopping tonight, it might just double as dinner. You grip your carved wooden spoon like a weapon. But the real fight is with your taste buds. The rice is thin, soupy, more water than substance. Floating in it is something unidentifiable, possibly fish paste, possibly swamp residue, possibly last week's leftovers reborn through fermentation and denial. The Khmer name is Prahok, and it smells like if fish and blue cheese got into an argument and nobody won. It's a staple. It's a delicacy. It's a life lesson in lowering expectations. You eat slowly. Not for enjoyment, there's nothing enjoyable here, but because fast eating leads to fast regret. A stray pepper seed singes your throat, and the aftertaste is somehow saltier than seawater. There's no drink, only more rice soup, now flavored with tears and vague anxiety. Historians often praise the Khmer diet as varied and adapted to environment. Technically true, there are vegetables, fish, herbs, but you don't get those unless you grow them, catch them, or perform a minor miracle involving a goat skull and moonlight. Protein comes with luck in season. In rainy months, you might catch frogs. In dry months, you might catch nothing but sunstroke. There's always the backup plan insects, grilled crickets, roasted ants, maybe a beetle stew if you're feeling luxurious. Crunchy, tangy, terrifyingly full of legs. You close your eyes and chew. It's either a high-protein snack or a midlife crisis in bug form. Today's side dish is a boiled root that tastes like wet linen and childhood trauma. You gnaw on it, while your cousin chews something even less identifiable. He says it's a lizard, but won't specify the species. You nod solemnly. It's not polite to ask questions during mealtime or cry. A fringe culinary note. Some villagers ferment river snails with crushed lemongrass and sun-dry them into chewy cubes. These are either a beloved snack or a declaration of war against your intestines. You've tried them twice. You'll try them again tomorrow, because hunger is persuasive. The clay pot of water on the floor has been filtered by sitting quietly and hoping the parasites get bored. It smells faintly of moss and leech memories. You drink anyway, because the rice paste is drying your throat, and your standards dissolved sometime last week. Lunch is identical. Same rice, same paste, same game of, is this crunchy because of spice or because of gravel? The answer is usually gravel. You chew carefully. You swallow carefully. You live carefully. Historians still argue whether the average peasant's diet was nourishing or barely survivable. Some ancient inscriptions speak of rice surpluses and elaborate banquets, but those were for royalty and temple feasts. For you, it's just endless spoonfuls of beige food flavored with uncertainty. Occasionally, you get a chili. That's the highlight of your week and the destruction of your insides. You once cried for 15 minutes after eating one. Your uncle called it spirit cleansing. Your stomach called it sabotage. Dinner is optional. If someone caught a fish, great. If not, you gnaw on sour tamarind pods and pretend it's dessert. Your aunt sometimes boils banana peels into a kind of soup. It tastes like boiled sadness. You thank her anyway. No forks, no napkins, no dining table. You eat from a shared bowl, seated on the floor, with everyone else's elbows in your face. The chickens are watching. The dog is judging. The bugs are helping themselves. You're full not of food, but of exhaustion, salt, and questions. You burp quietly and taste yesterday, and you still have 3 more meals of this tomorrow. You are now wearing your only outfit again. It's not fashion. It's not flattering. It's a long strip of cloth called a sampot, and it's wrapped around your waist like an ancient compromise between a towel and a cry for help. There's no top, unless you count your sunburn. And as the humid wind picks up, the fabric sticks to your skin like a second, itchier layer of regret. There's no underwear. There's no choice. The sampot is your daily uniform, your sleeping gear, your field attire, and your ceremonial best. You've retied it so many times. Your fingers could do it in the dark, which is handy, since there's no light in the house, and you're often too sleep-deprived to see straight anyway. Today's color is dust with a hint of damp. It's been washed, but only in the sense that it's been submerged in the same river that serves as everyone's everything. It smells like mud, fish, and possibly ancient curses. You tell yourself it's earthy. The lice agree. You scratch your arm, then your neck, then your soul. Fleas live here now. Lice are long-term tenants. A mysterious rash has taken up residence under your waistband. And your aunt insists it's a blessing from a river goddess. You are not convinced. Historians still debate whether the minimalist clothing style of the Khmer people was an adaptation to climate or simply an unavoidable reality of material scarcity. Lightweight cotton was common, sure, but silk reserved for the upper class. You don't even look at silk unless you want to feel jealous and underdressed at the same time. You try not to complain. After all, you do technically own a second sandpot. It's stored under your bedding for special occasions, festivals, funerals, or the kind of rice harvest where someone brings tamarind. It's no cleaner, just less. Emotionally tired. Your cousin once had a belt made of woven vine. It disintegrated after a rainstorm. You all pretended it never existed. Now, you just tuck the fabric in and hope for structural loyalty. The upper body situation varies. Men often go shirtless. Women wear a sabaya strip of cloth that's part shawl, part bra, part hope. On cooler mornings, you might throw a cotton scarf over your shoulders. But don't let it fool you. You're still cold, or burning, or both. Shoes. You laugh softly at the idea. Your feet are calloused, blistered, imperfectly shaped to identify gravel by feel. When you do get a pair of sandals, usually made from woven palm or leftover tragedy, they break within the week. Then it's back to barefoot, which is somehow both traditional and unavoidable. The fringe detail. Certain colors are forbidden during temple rituals unless you're a monk or high-ranking official. Accidentally wearing the wrong hue near a shrine might lead to shame, scolding, or a full-blown spiritual intervention. So you learn to blend in not just with mud, but with expectations. You walk through the village. Everyone looks the same, dust-covered, cloth-wrapped, mildly itchy. The only differences are in smell, stitching, and how confidently someone adjusts their falling sandpot mid-step. Laundry is a joke. You wash your clothes in the same water that tried to drown you yesterday. There's no soap, just sand, friction, and the whispered hope that the sun will burn the germs away. You hang the fabric on a bamboo pole, watch it flap in the wind, and pray it doesn't blow into the neighbor's latrine bucket again. Historians note that traditional Khmer clothing was designed for airflow and ease. You note that your thighs haven't been dry since February. It's hot, it's sticky, it's undignified. And this is you. At your cleanest, your gums are throbbing again. It starts as a dull itch behind your molars, then builds into a full-blown toothache that radiates up into your skull and down your neck. You're not sure if it's the betel nut, the gravel in last night's rice, or just the ancient spirits finally claiming their overdue rent. Either way, you're awake now. Very awake. Welcome to Khmer Dental Care. No dentists, no toothbrushes, and no hope. You reach for your daily chew betel nut wrapped in a betel leaf, sprinkled with a dash of slaked lime powder. It's technically a stimulant, but functionally, it's a socially accepted mouth destroyer. You chew it slowly, feeling the bitter tingle spread across your tongue, staining your teeth a glossy black that locals find beautiful and ominous. It's trendy, it's traditional, and it's slowly murdering your gums. The juice dribbles from the corners of your mouth, and you spit a dark red stream into the dirt. It looks like blood because it practically is. You wipe your chin with your sleeve and pretend you don't feel the loose tooth wobbling in place. Historians still debate whether betel nut chewing was a cultural beauty standard or just a widespread addiction with prestige branding. Some argue it prevented tooth decay. Others say it masked it with aesthetic bloodstains and long-term nerve damage. You've never used a toothbrush. The concept is foreign. Instead, you chew sticks, specifically twigs from the neem tree or something that vaguely resembles it. You gnaw one end until it frays, then scrub your teeth with it like a very bitter paintbrush. It works. In theory. In reality, it just moves the grime around while you squint into a polished copper bowl pretending it's a mirror. And floss, you wish. You'd settle for a toothpick that doesn't splinter. Your cousin once had a tooth pulled, not by a dentist, by a rice farmer with strong fingers and a vague understanding of leverage. No anesthetic, just two men, one robe, a strong tug, and several hours of regret. The infected socket swelled shut for a week. He said it was the best nap he ever had. You, too. Consider pulling your aching molar. You weigh your options, endure the pain. Cry into your sandpot, or beg a village elder to treat it with a poultice made of turmeric, mint, and a frog's thigh bone. No one's quite sure if it's a remedy or a curse, but either way, it smells awful, and your cheek is still swollen. Fringe fact: some high-status women painted their lips black to match their teeth, believing it warded off evil spirits and suitors with low standards. You try it once. It works. Everyone avoids you for a week. It's the closest thing you've had to personal space since birth. There is no concept of cavities, bacteria, or gum disease. Only pain, and the occasional monk who insists you're being punished for sins in a past life, possibly one involving disrespect toward a crocodile. And still, you chew. You chew because it's expected, because it dulls hunger, because it makes you feel awake even when your teeth are plotting their escape. By nightfall, your jaw aches from both chewing and trying not to scream. You cradle your cheek, wrap a scrap of cloth around your head, and try to sleep with your face pressed gently against a pot of warm river stones. Not because it helps, but because hope is the only medicine available. Historians write about the grandeur of Angkor, the genius of temple irrigation, the elegance of Khmer sculpture, but they rarely mention what it feels like to lie awake in the dark, your mouth full of blood, spit, and regret, whispering apologies to your molars like they're old lovers leaving town. And they are. Before the sun even remembers to rise, you're already knee-deep in a rice paddy that feels suspiciously like a swamp with branding. The water is murky, warm, and enthusiastically filled with leeches. You've stopped caring. They attach to your ankles like clingy X's. You flick one off. Another takes its place. You sigh, mostly through your pores, and keep planting. This is your job. This is your life. It's not romantic. It's not sacred. It's not even seasonal. It is daily, relentless, back-breaking labor, all in service of a rice harvest that you may or may not get to eat. You bend down to press a young rice shoot into the mud, over and over, until your spine forgets it was ever upright. You don't count the hours. There is no concept of a work week. Just work, then sleep, then work again. Repeat until you die, or your back does. Historians still debate whether ancient Khmer societies' massive construction projects like Angkor Wat, Angkor Thom, and all their many steps were built by conscripted labor, slaves, or citizens performing religious service. All you know is that you once spent 4 weeks hauling stones up a hill with a rope and a prayer, and no one even gave you a second bowl of rice. Today, it's farming. Tomorrow, maybe it's temple sweeping, fish gutting, or elephant poop collection. The empire thrives on your exhaustion. Women, they do everything. They farm, they cook, they manage households. They carry water in jars balanced on their heads while nursing a baby and swatting flies with their eyebrows. Your sister gave birth last week. Today she's back in the field, breastfeeding with one arm and planting with the other. No maternity leave, just maternal endurance. Even children work. Your little cousin is 5 and already better than you at snaring frogs. He also once fell asleep while carrying firewood. No one woke him. It was the best rest he's ever had. A fringe detail royal decrees from the time mentioned festivals with dancing and music. You've been to one. It rained. The rice beer was warm. The dancing was mostly swaying in pain, but it was technically fun if you squinted and ignored the blisters. And the tools delightfully primitive. A wooden plow dragged by a buffalo that would rather be anywhere else. A sickle sharper than your wit, but duller than your outlook. Your hands are your most reliable tool, and they are cracked, swollen, and permanently mud-stained. You once dropped a hoe on your foot. No one noticed. You kept working. You don't take breaks. You find pauses, those rare 5 seconds when your body slows just long enough to process its own suffering. Then someone yells, and you start again. Lunch is eaten standing, squatting, or walking. It's more rice. Always rice. With pickled vegetables if you're lucky. With ants, if you're not. You chew quickly, swallow even faster, and pray the chili doesn't trigger a second eruption in your already furious molar. By mid-afternoon, the sun is directly overhead, and your sweat could irrigate its own paddy. You wring out your sandpot and keep working. The buffalo looks at you like it wants to unionize. You dream of shade, of sitting, of a world where your job isn't synonymous with survival. But those dreams are reserved for monks and the very rich. You work. And as the sun finally dips behind the distant temples, casting long shadows over fields you barely finished, you stand for the first time in hours. Your legs protest. Your knees laugh. Your back decides to retire. But the rice is planted. You walk home slowly, dragging your feet through the same mud that raised you. Tomorrow, you'll do it again and again, until one day you don't. But not today. Today, the mud wins. Again. The sky above you is flat white, like a giant steaming lid pressed down on the entire empire. It's the dry season, and the air feels like a rice cooker left on high for 3 months straight. The sun doesn't rise, it attacks. You're not sweating because it's hot. You're sweating because your body is attempting a full-blown protest. You wipe your face with your already soaked sabai and immediately regret it. Now it's hotter and smells like old fish sauce. Your scalp itches beneath your half-dry braid. Your arms are sunburned in a patchy mosaic from all those hours spent bent over water or fire or disappointment. The house, if you can call it that, is not a refuge. It's a greenhouse with termites. The thatched roof has absorbed the heat, like it's auditioning to be a clay oven. You walk inside and feel the air thicken. Congratulations. You've entered a sweat lodge with chickens. You lie down for just a moment. Your straw mat is approximately the same temperature as the inside of a baked duck yam. You try not to move. Moving makes you hotter. But lying still just makes you aware of how hot you are. You briefly wonder if death would be cooler. And then, just when you think the climate can't hate you, more night falls. And the cold arrives like an emotional betrayal. The same open walls that let the breeze in during the day now let in cold drafts, mosquitoes, and every existential doubt you've ever had. You shiver in your damp sandpot, teeth chattering. Your bedmate, either a cousin or a chicken, you're not sure anymore, scoots closer. It's less for warmth and more for shared suffering. Historians still argue whether ancient Khmer engineering successfully moderated temperature through clever housing design, or whether most homes were just glorified drying racks for human misery. The temples, with their thick stone walls and sacred ponds, stayed cool. You do not live in a temple. You do not know cool. Then comes the monsoon season. Rain hits like a tantrum. For 3 months, your house becomes a leaky sponge, and the outdoors becomes an elaborate wet trap. You try to sleep, but the roof drips directly onto your left ear. You move. Now it drips on your nose. You move again. Now it drips on your dignity. The clay floor turns to sludge. Your feet make squishing sounds. Your entire world smells like wet bamboo and toe fungus. Your cousin slips carrying the rice jar and lands in the family fire pit. No one laughs. You're all too damp to feel amusement. A fringe environmental horror, black mold. It grows on everything walls, mats, your soul. Some families light incense to keep it at bay. Others just give up and call it a protective spirit. And the insects. Oh, the insects. In dry season, they fly in your face. In wet season, they lay eggs in your bedding. The mosquitoes sing you lullabies that end in malaria. The ants claim your leftovers and possibly your last nerve. You try to fan yourself with a palm leaf, but it only pushes the heat around like bad gossip. You fan harder. Your cousin yells that you're creating a breeze of doom You stop. And yet, you keep going. You keep waking up in your personal sweat sack. Keep sleeping through floods. Keep surviving like your ancestors taught you by gritting your teeth and refusing to admit defeat to the weather. Because in the Khmer Empire, climate isn't something you adjust. It's something you surrender to daily, reluctantly. And sometimes, while wearing a leaf hat that definitely doesn't help. You kneel by the river at dawn, cupping water in your hands that could either bless you or slowly liquefy your intestines. There's no tap, no filter, no assurance. Just water that's sacred, scenic, and vaguely sentient with microscopic malice. You sip it anyway. It's that or dehydration, and you already tried chewing wet bamboo. That just gave you splinters in the soul. This river is your everything. You drink from it. You wash your body, your clothes, your rice pot, and occasionally, your sins in it. When someone dies, their ashes are scattered here, floating downstream, like fragrant apologies. It's poetic. It's beautiful. It's also kind of deadly. The surface is serene. Underneath, a full-time job of bacteria, parasites, fish waste, and whatever someone upstream just returned to nature without asking. You ignore it. Not because you don't care, but because there's literally nowhere else to go. Bathing is an act of hope wrapped in ritual. You wade in slowly, fully clothed, partly to protect your modesty, and mostly to shield yourself from the judgmental stares of passing water buffalo. You splash your arms, your face, your neck. You scrub with sand or bark. Soap. What a glamorous fantasy. You once heard of someone using ash mixed with lye. They no longer have eyebrows. The current pulls at your legs like a needy toddler. You squat to wash your lower half and immediately regret it. Something brushes your thigh. You scream silently. It was probably just a leaf or a water ghost. Same thing. And while you're rinsing your scalp with fishy brown water, your cousin is filling the family clay jar right next to you for drinking. You watch her carefully avoid the dead frog bobbing in the eddy and silently respect her ability to pretend that didn't happen. Historians still argue whether the Khmer had consistent methods of boiling or filtering their water. Some inscriptions mention fire jars used to heat water for ceremonial purposes. But whether boiling was common or a luxury is unclear. What is clear? You've never boiled anything in your life unless it was an accidental part of your own bath. A fringe belief from the time warns against bathing too often, especially during illness. The body is said to be open when wet, allowing evil spirits to sneak in through the pores like spectral burglars. So, people bathe with caution, which means less scrub the germs away and more sprinkle water on your knees and hope. You try not to think about worms, or dysentery, or the fever that took your uncle after one enthusiastic swim. You tell yourself that the water is blessed, divine, life-giving. Then you drink it and taste something suspiciously like regret and fermented moss. And yet, you keep coming back. You carry jar after jar to your home, careful not to spill a drop, even though you know half of it will evaporate or get used to soak someone's fungal foot rash. Even the temples, with their ornate basins and holy ponds, have no miracle cures. They shimmer with lotus flowers and snake statues and still manage to smell like damp feet. The nobles pour scented water on statues. You pour mud on your laundry. Still, water is worshipped. You leave offerings near the shore flowers, food, folded leaves to honor the spirits that dwell below. Not because you're devout, but because last time you skipped the ritual. You got a rash shaped like a screaming face. By nightfall, you sit by the same river, rinsing your bowl, your legs, and your bruised hopes. The water reflects the stars. For one brief moment, it feels gentle, forgiving, safe. You sip again. It isn't. And now, as the jungle quiets and the mosquitoes retreat for their midnight shift change, you lie once more on your bamboo mat, beneath a roof stitched together by sun, sweat, and slow decay. Your body aches back sore from bending, mouth still tingling from betel, skin marked by the day's slow war with weather and water alike. The heat has eased, just a little. The air smells of smoke and rice. You close your eyes, hearing frogs croak and insects hum in the distance, their voices forming a lullaby of survival. You've made it through another day in the Khmer Empire. No feast, no comfort, no clean socks, but you're here, breathing, dreaming of a world with real beds and cold drinks. Let the river keep its secrets tonight. Let the spirits, both friendly and mildly passive-aggressive, drift off to sleep with you. The temples still stand, the rice still grows, and you, somehow, still endure. So rest, weary time traveler. Tomorrow waits, but not yet, not just now. We wrap our hands around a warm clay cup filled with a thick, golden swirl of milk and melted ghee, sitting quietly under a flickering oil lamp in an ancient Indian courtyard. The cow outside is unimpressed. The moon is overhead, your bones ache, and your grandmother insists this oily potion is the difference between nightmares and nirvana. You would never think that something as ordinary as butter could be worshipped as a sedative. But this isn't your fridge butter. This is ghee clarified, caramelized, and consecrated in the Vedas with the kind of reverence modern coffee could only dream of. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And your local time, now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You raise the cup to your lips. The milk is just the right side of hot, steamed slowly over a flame that doubles as mosquito repellent. It's thick, heavy, with a slightly nutty aroma. The ghee has been infused with herbs, maybe a little cardamom, maybe just thyme and superstition. Either way, it coats your throat like a sleepy spell whispered by someone who deeply believes in digestion. Ayurvedic medicine, in all its slow and plant-based glory, considers ghee not just food, but medicine liquid ojas, or vital essence. And the logic follows if your nerves are frayed, your stomach's rumbling, and your soul is doing laps in anxiety. What you clearly need is an internal oil change. Smooth the inside, soothe the outside. You don't need a sleeping pill. You need a dairy product that's been blessed, boiled, and politely respected by generations. Historians agree that warm milk and ghee were staples in Ayurvedic bedtime rituals for centuries. Some even believed this duo directly nourished brain tissue's Maja Dhatu. To be precise, whether that's true or just Sanskrit for you, need to relax, is still politely up for debate. A fringe belief. Some Ayurvedic physicians suggested stirring the mixture only clockwise to align with the body's internal wind. Anti-clockwise stirring, allegedly, disturbed your mental balance and possibly your ancestors. You don't argue. You stir obediently. You've just eaten dinner lentils, rice, a lot of chewing. Your stomach is active. Your joints are tired. According to Ayurvedic tradition, now is the perfect time to pachana, or digest with a little help. The ghee will slide the nutrients to the right places. The milk will cool the internal fire. And you you'll probably sleep with your mouth slightly open and your dreams coated in clarified logic. Scholars still argue whether this ritual was actually sedating, or whether the comfort of routine, the full stomach, and the warm belly glow just felt medicinal. Like hugging your insides with silk. You finish the cup. You lick your lips. It tastes like sleep disguised as dessert. The oil lamp flickers. The cow yawns. You burp once and smile. You lie back on a stone bench in ancient Athens, full of grilled lamb, flatbread, and philosophical regrets. When someone hands you a bowl of lettuce, not a salad, just lettuce, wilted, bitter, and apparently your ticket to dreamland, you blink at it. This is supposed to make you sleep. It looks more like something scraped off a lazy farmer's sandal. But in ancient Greece, lettuce wasn't just food. It was medicine in disguise. The Greeks believed it cooled the body, soothed the mind, and prepared the soul for sleep. They even had a word for its sleep-inducing magic hypnoticon. Add a drizzle of poppy syrup, and you've just crafted the bedtime snack of sleepy philosophers and slightly high insomniacs. You nibble slowly. It's not great. The taste is somewhere between sadness and leftover rainwater. But you keep eating because your dinner companion, a stern-bearded man in a toga, swears this stuff will align your humors. You don't even know which humors are misaligned, but you're pretty sure they all need a nap. Historians still argue whether lettuce itself had measurable sedative properties, or whether it just gave the digestive system a chance to apologize after dinner. Some believe it was the lactucarium, a milky sap found in lettuce stems, that created the calming effect. Others suspect the real reason you're dozing is because you're also sipping wine, listening to pan flute music, and ignoring your responsibilities. The fringe detail: lettuce was associated with the god Adonis. After he died again, Greek gods rarely stayed dead. Lettuce was said to grow from his blood. Because nothing says sweet dreams like chewing on the botanical leftovers of a tragic mythological death. Tonight, though, there's a twist. Your lettuce isn't alone. It comes with a small vial of opium syrup, technically medicinal, but only if you ignore the dosage. The Greeks knew what poppy plants could do. And while they didn't understand dopamine receptors, they definitely understood that mixing narcotics with vegetables made dinner parties much more interesting. You take a sip. It tastes like fermented despair. Your mouth tingles. Your eyes feel like they've been oiled. The stars above Athens start to swirl gently, like someone just spun the sky for fun. Your toga suddenly weighs 3 times more than it did before. Your body melts into the stone bench, and even the night air feels thick with slow intentions. You try to keep thinking about Plato's latest rant on justice. You fail. Lettuce wins. Historians note that lettuce was often eaten at the end of large meals to induce a state of relaxation, signaling to both your stomach and your brain that the symposium was over. Whether the lettuce worked or your dinner guests just ran out of conversation is still debated. But you're definitely slipping into the arms of Morpheus. You've chewed your bitter leaves. You've sipped your sleepy syrup. And now the gods are arguing softly in the background. While your brain quietly exits the room, you fall asleep, dreaming of salad. You wake up to a rooster that's late, a street that smells like wet limestone, and a neighbor loudly discussing dreams with a palm leaf astrologer. Welcome back to ancient India. where sleep isn't just something that happens to you. It's a balance of doshas, a ritual of herbs, and sometimes a spoonful of honey smeared under your tongue like bedtime gold. This morning's recipe for sleep is sweet, sticky, and definitely be approved. Honey, called madhu in Sanskrit, wasn't just a sweetener, it was a medicine, a purifier, and, if taken correctly, it was a sedative wrapped in floral whispers. You don't spread it on toast because toast hasn't been invented. Instead, you mix it into warm water or herbal teas, usually alongside powdered herbs like ashwagandha or brahmi. You sip it slowly while a Brahmin mutters something about energy channels. The honey coats your insides like a hug from a very organized beekeeper. Modern studies might hint at honey triggering melatonin production, but historians still argue whether ancient practitioners knew this or were simply charmed by how nature gift-wrapped glucose in such adorable hexagons. The quirky bit, in some traditions, honey had to be collected before dawn, preferably on an auspicious lunar day, not just for potency, but so the bees wouldn't notice you robbing them. Apparently, ancient sleep aids required stealth and astrology. You watch a young boy gently turn a clay jar of honey, whispering to it as if the bees might still be listening. He adds a pinch of powdered nutmeg, another ancient favorite for the restless. And now your sleepy cocktail smells like spiced candy and temple air. Nutmeg, known as jaifal, was both revered and feared. A little helped with digestion and dreams. A lot caused hallucinations, or as they called it, the wandering of the senses. You trust the boy got the dosage right because you're too tired to astrally project tonight. The tea hits your stomach with warmth and sweetness. Your shoulders drop, your breath slows, and the soft hum of a veena somewhere in the distance seems to harmonize with your nervous system. Historians agree that Ayurvedic physicians often recommended honey as part of evening routines, sometimes mixed with milk, sometimes with herbal ghee. The goal was always the same: slow everything down except your digestion, which still had to sprint its marathon through legumes, rice, and spicy leftovers. You lie down on a grass mat, your belly warm, your teeth a little sticky. The air is thick with sandalwood and sleep pressure. The temple bells fade into frog croaks. You roll to your side, the honey still sweet on your breath. You dream of bees, and none of them sting. The day grows older, and so do you emotionally, physically, and possibly spiritually after trying to grind sesame seeds by hand for what feels like 3 hours. Welcome to the sleepy pantry of the ancient Indian kitchen, where sesame oil isn't just for cooking, it's also for calming the nervous system, balancing your chakras, and, with any luck, not staining your only robe. Sesame oil, or tila tela, was considered sacred, not just by cooks, but by physicians, priests, and people who thought pouring it into your ears might chase out bad dreams. Spoiler, it didn't. But it did make your pillow smell like a stir-fry. Tonight, you don't drink it, you massage it. Warmed gently over a clay stove, the oil is applied to your scalp, your feet, your temples. A grandmother, with a grip like a blacksmith's, works it into your joints while explaining that sleep isn't just a need, it's your body's spiritual realignment. You nod, half from agreement, half from cranial compression. Historians still argue whether the calming effects came from the oil itself or from the ritual surrounding it. Was it chemistry or choreography? Sesame oil contains tryptophan and vitamin E. Sure, but it's hard to tell if that's what's making you sleepy, or if it's the temple chants and your rapidly declining will to resist being horizontal, a lesser-known tidbit. In some Vedic texts, sesame is referred to as the seed of immortality, which feels ironic, considering you currently feel like you've aged 20 years from trying to stay awake after the foot massage alone. Once slicked in sesame, you're swaddled in a sheet like a fragrant burrito and invited to lie near a small clay lamp. The flame dances, the oil seeps, and the world tilts ever so slightly toward unconsciousness. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ancient world, in a dim room in Epidaurus, the Greeks are performing their own sleepy ritual, feasting on barley porridge thickened with herbs and washed down with goat milk. Barley crith was their answer to every bodily complaint, including sleeplessness. Heavy in fiber and heavier in consistency. It did what modern melatonin gummies try to make you wish you hadn't eaten so much. You stir the pot with a wooden spoon, watching the porridge glorp and gloop like an edible swamp. They say it calms the stomach, cools the liver, and possibly, depending on the moon, phase coaxes the mind into silence. The trick is adding chamomile, or fennel, or any number of herbs stored in pouches that look suspiciously like sock puppets. One pouch smells like licorice and disappointment. Another like floral soap that lost a bar fight. You pour your bowl, sip your milk, and try not to chew too aggressively, lest your jaw wake up the neighbors. Historians agree that ancient diets often prioritize digestion as the key to rest. After all, nothing keeps you awake like gastrointestinal regret. But was it the barley's glycemic index, or just the fact that everything else in your life was exhausting? That's still up for debate. Either way, sesame and barley have one thing in common. They both lull you back to that quiet, humming place where the flames flicker, the oil soaks in, and your consciousness gently rolls over and snores. You're back in the open-air courtyard of your rented mud brick reality, trying to process why your bedtime drink is bubbling. It's not cursed, at least. Not officially. It's just ashwagandha. And yes, it smells faintly like wet hay and impending nap. Ashwagandha, whose name charmingly translates to smell of horse, was the superstar of ancient Indian herbal medicine. Known for giving you the vitality of a stallion, which, given the average lifespan back then, might have meant simply not dying. During monsoon season, it was often mixed with warm milk to help induce sleep and boost ojas. A subtle energy essence that you absolutely do not understand, but desperately wish to possess. You sip, you swallow. You consider if the gritty aftertaste is spiritual, or just the result of someone forgetting to strain it properly. The brew warms your throat like a hug from a sleepy cow, and your thoughts begin to feel like molasses. Historians still argue whether ashwagandha was used more for anxiety, insomnia, or male enhancement. Perhaps all three, because in ancient times, mental health wasn't treated. It was brewed, massaged, and whispered over by someone who had never heard the word serotonin. Over in the Hellenic world, your Greek twin is lying on a slab of stone, being treated for melancholia. The ancient version of it's been a long week. The prescription, a concoction of poppy juice and lettuce. That's right, lettuce. Not the crisp iceberg kind you ignore in modern salads, but a bitter, wild variety known as Lactuca virosa, which Greeks believed cooled the body and quieted passions. Essentially, ancient melatonin with a side of social celibacy. You gnaw on a lettuce leaf that tastes like regret, while a physician chants about the four humors and stirs something you strongly suspect contains fermented goat parts, lettuce, poppy, and vinegar. They're not the tastiest sleep combo, but they sure are effective. Probably because the alternative was talking to your relatives all night. The quirky bit in some temples. Priests believed dreams were messages from the gods. So sleep wasn't just biological, it was spiritual correspondence. To enhance that communication, they prescribed dream-friendly diets, heavy in lettuce, honey, and sacred water, because apparently the gods have very specific culinary requirements. As your eyelids grow heavy, the ambient sound of frogs and crackling oil competes with your stomach, which is slightly confused but mostly cooperative. You lie back, draped in a blanket, stiff from last week's turmeric spill, and feel the plants slowly do their work. Your pulse steadies, your limbs forget their name, and your dreams begin assembling like a bizarre parade complete with chariots, herbs, and a very sleepy stallion. Whatever this mixture does, whether it calms your doshas or just knocks you out via sheer confusion, it's working. Sleep doesn't come fast in the ancient world, but when it does, it arrives on the back of herbs with names you can't pronounce and effects that historians still don't fully agree on. And right now, you couldn't care less. You awaken in the middle of the night, not from noise or nightmares, but because your mouth feels like it's been stuffed with cotton dipped in fennel. That's right. It's time for the midnight remedy. In ancient Indian households, nighttime wasn't the end of healing. It was the prime time for maintenance. You roll over and reach for a small pouch of jatamansi root, dried and braided like an herbal friendship bracelet from someone who really wants you to sleep for 12 hours. Jatamansi, sometimes called spikenard, was a prized Ayurvedic sedative, calming both the mind and the occasional neighbor who thought your snoring was a demonic presence. You chew it, slowly, like a cow giving up on life. It's bitter, earthy, slightly moldy, and vaguely reminiscent of licking a temple wall. But according to tradition, this root grounds your thoughts and cools your overactive brain, which, let's be honest, doesn't need cooling as much as it needs a full system reboot. Meanwhile, in a breezy corner of ancient Athens, someone else is having their own herbal moment by sniffing the fumes of burning hyoscyamus, known today as henbane. This powerful plant was both medicine and mild poison. Take too much, and you meet Hades. Take just enough, and you might see the ceiling melt and then fall asleep right after. Historians still argue whether henbane's sedative use was intentional or just an accidental benefit of ancient people being way too comfortable burning dangerous plants indoors. Either way, its smoky embrace helped calm tremors, slow the mind, and lull insomniacs into hazy dreams full of satyrs, unfinished oaths, and the realization that someone forgot to feed the goats. You settle back in your clay-walled hut, fumigated with a blend of calming herbs like sandalwood, vetiver, and possibly last month's leftovers. You're wrapped in a woven cotton sheet stiffened by ritual and humidity, and someone nearby is chanting a hymn that's either a lullaby or a weather complaint. The quirky bit, in some regions, Sleep was considered a miniature death, anupashaya, where your soul left the body temporarily to roam spiritual planes, which is a great idea, unless your soul forgets how to get back, and you wake up with the personality of a mongoose. To prevent this, healers often left protective talismans by your bedside: a tiny copper elephant, a strip of turmeric, a chunk of camphor, all meant to anchor your spirit so it doesn't wander off mid-dream and end up reincarnated as a goat herder in a colder district. Your breath slows. The jadamansi starts to kick in slowly, dulling your anxiety, muting your mental to-do list like survive tomorrow and don't step in cow dung again, and whispering promises of oblivion from the corner. The faint smell of honey and warm oil lingers like a bedtime story told in scent. You drift again, held not by memory foam, but by tradition, aroma, and the potent reality that when ancient people wanted sleep, they did not mess around. They brewed it, burned it, chewed it, and prayed it into being. And tonight, it's working. You wake up groggy, but intact, no spiritual possession, no dream-wandering mishap, just a mild herbal hangover and the vague memory of a temple elephant dancing in your dreams. Welcome to ancient breakfast, where sleep isn't just something you drift into, it's something you continue to digest. The morning routine involves spooning a sticky paste of ghee, honey, and powdered tagara root into your mouth like slurping down melted incense. Tagara, a close cousin to valerian, was believed to still the winds of the mind, which is poetic shorthand for knock you back into nap mode before you can overthink your life choices. Historians still argue whether this was used primarily for calming children, monks, or just desperate husbands trying not to scream about rice taxes before sunrise. This paste is technically a tonic, but it feels suspiciously like breakfast sedative pudding. And somehow, despite the texture of candle wax and the aftertaste of burnt flowers, you find yourself yawning mid-chew, which is precisely the point. On the Greek side of things, the breakfast table, if you're rich enough to have one, isn't much cheerier. Here, a small ceramic bowl holds a porridge soaked in warm goat's milk, drizzled with poppy seed extract. Sleep was so prized in the Hellenistic world that people tried to prolong it through food. Why get up when you can eat something that tells your nervous system to sit back down? The quirky bit. In some Aesculapian healing temples, the caretakers would serve dream-prolonging meals after temple sleep rituals like a reverse coffee break. People would wake from their sacred sleep, mumble something about Apollo's sandals, and be fed sleep-inducing snacks to keep the visions going. That's right, you're encouraged to nap again. After your ceremonial nap, you swallow your poppy gruel, which tastes like damp linen and poor decisions, and sit in silence. The stone bench is cold. The breeze is aggressive. Your body doesn't feel rested so much as paused, like your nervous system is in airplane mode. And still, that's preferable to the alternative waking fully into a world where wild dogs, aggressive tax collectors, and questionable bathwater await you. In that context, a breakfast sedative seems like a mercy, maybe even a survival tactic. You take a slow breath. The herbal oils someone rubbed into your temples before sleep are now crusted into your hairline. But the scent lingers: camphor, clove, maybe crushed tulsi leaves. You smell like a forest shrine and feel like one too sacred, slightly damp, and buzzing with leftover visions. And just as you consider standing up, someone brings over a warm decoction of almond milk and saffron, a precious, golden elixir so expensive that drinking it feels like a crime. Saffron was believed to calm the heart, soothe the nerves, and induce soft dreams tinged with sunshine. It was also believed to make you less prone to melancholy, which, in ancient Greece and India alike, basically meant not weeping openly in the marketplace. The potion is creamy, oddly floral, and dangerously soporific. You are supposed to go to work. You are supposed to pay your landlord with coconuts or clay tokens or whatever currency makes sense today. But instead, you sit, you sip, you blink slowly, because your breakfast was engineered by several thousand years of medicine to make you do exactly that. Rest, reset, re-enter the waking world at your own peril. Midday arrives, and instead of charging into it with sword-drawn energy, you're gliding slow, soft, and slightly confused about which dream you're still in. That's how effective ancient sleep-supporting diets were, in both Indian and Greek traditions. The line between a meal and a medicine was blurrier than your vision after a saffron almond tonic. Lunch is no pep rally either. In the Ayurvedic kitchen, you're served a khichdi soft rice and mung dal, gently spiced with cumin, coriander, and a dollop of ghee. This dish doesn't wake you up. It coaxes your intestines into humming a lullaby. It's the kind of food that hugs your organs from the inside. Not ideal for a productive afternoon, but excellent for a soft glide back toward drowsy contentment. Greeks weren't much different. A modest mid-afternoon snack might include barley bread, aged goat cheese, and a tea made from lettuce. Not iceberg, mind you, but wild lettuce, Lactuca virosa, also known as opium lettuce. Ancient physicians believed it contained cooling properties for the body and brain, ideal for treating heated thoughts. You know, like ambition, rage, or the urge to argue with your uncle about grain prices. Historians still argue whether the lettuce was actually psychoactive or just so boring it lulled people into submission. Either way, it was praised by Galen and other medical thinkers for its gentle sedative qualities, basically the Xanax of the Agora. As you gnaw on your barley bread, which might as well be limestone toast, your thoughts turn to the strange rhythm of these cultures. Rest, reflect, chew something mildly drugged, repeat. It's almost as if these ancient people knew that uninterrupted activity wasn't noble. It was nonsense. And if you're wealthy, your mid-afternoon siesta might include a sweet syrup of rosewater, cardamom, and vetiver. Yes, vetiver again. The grass that smells like rainy temples and herbal department stores. This cooling concoction was designed not just to soothe digestion, but to calm pitta, your fiery dosha. According to Ayurveda, because obviously, what better way to handle existential dread and scorching heat than with sugary, floral nap juice? The quirky bit in some traditions. It was believed that if you napped right after lunch with a sandalwood mark on your forehead, your dreams would be visited by friendly spirits offering health advice. Whether those spirits knew anything about actual medicine is another story. But hey, it's cheaper than a copay. You recline on your woven mat, eyelids twitching from exhaustion and vetiver. A parrot squawks somewhere nearby. A goat stomps past your window. Life goes on, but your body has clocked out. And it's not laziness, it's cultural wisdom. Even Hippocrates, so the so-called father of modern medicine, recommended post-lunch rest for the body to assimilate humors. You're not sure what that means, but your humors definitely feel scrambled. So you assume reclining is the correct response. And that's the thing, these cultures didn't chase energy. They managed it like a miser hoards gold. They understood that rest wasn't the reward for hard work. It was part of the work. So here you are, horizontal again, halfway between sleep and goat-induced terror, wondering if maybe, just maybe, ancient people had the right idea. If you can't fix the world, at least soften its edges with warm milk and lettuce tea. As evening curls in with soft, smoke-smeared skies and the smell of burning neem leaves, your body is already negotiating a truce with the day. You haven't fought a war. You haven't planted fields. You haven't even argued with a tax collector. But thanks to a curated cocktail of ancient medicinal foods, you are deeply, profoundly tired. Not the panicked, caffeine crash kind of tired. The slow, sacred kind. The kind that makes shadows look like lullabies. Dinner, unsurprisingly, does not revive you. In ancient Indian homes, the night meal is deliberately light and soothing. Rice cooked to a porridge-like consistency, known as congee, is served warm and slightly fermented. It smells faintly sour, tastes like wet linen, and works like a lullaby inside your stomach. Alongside, it's spiced buttermilk with crushed cumin and black salt. A digestive meant to settle the fires and prepare your system for a night of temple-grade stillness. Across the Aegean, Greeks end the day with lentils drizzled in olive oil and a dried fig or two nature's sleepy candy. A cup of warm goat milk may follow, steeped with a few sprigs of chamomile or a pinch of powdered poppy seed, depending on how dramatic your dreams need to be. Historians still argue whether these bedtime concoctions were more ritual than remedy, but it's hard to ignore the result: you're horizontal before the amphora's even empty. And here's the ironic punchline in both cultures. Sleep wasn't just a personal need, it was a spiritual event. Ancient India's yogic nidra and Greece's dream incubation in healing temples weren't fringe ideas, they were the actual bedtime routines. You didn't just go to bed, you were guided into the underworld of the unconscious, escorted by nutrition, breath, and deeply inconvenient mattress alternatives. The quirky bit: some Ayurvedic texts advise eating a small quantity of boiled banana before bed, not for its taste or nutrients, but because the banana is considered a fruit with downward energy. Translation: it tells your body to let go of tension, of ambition, of dignity. It is the fruit version of an exhale. You exhale. The room is quiet except for a flickering oil lamp and the soft creak of wood beams. You lie on a grass mat, padded by old cotton that smells like turmeric and yesterday's incense. Outside, frogs begin their choral warm-up. The air hums with night's chorus. You feel disassembled in the best way. You don't have a mattress. You don't have blackout curtains. But you do have triphala, an Ayurvedic blend of 3 fruits powdered and mixed into warm water before bed. It tastes like bitter tree bark with regrets, but your ancestors swore by it for digestion, longevity, and yes, better dreams. And here's your final reality check. You would never think that civilizations without melatonin gummies, essential oil diffusers, or weighted blankets could be better at sleep than we are. But they might be, because every spoonful of their day was built to gently nudge the body back toward balance, to cradle you in the quiet knowledge that rest isn't indulgence, it's medicine. You close your eyes, and now, as the warmth of imaginary herbs settles in your chest and the echoes of ancient spoons fade, your body does what it's always longed to do: let go. The noises of daily survival, the brightness of urgent thoughts, all dim softly beneath a weightless veil. In ancient kitchens filled with grinding stones and flickering firelight, they knew this moment. They respected it, cradled it, protected it. They stirred it into soups and whispered it into bedtime brews. So tonight, you aren't just falling asleep. You're stepping into a river of memory, of cultures who knew rest as sacred and stillness as strength. You're not expected to solve anything, only to breathe, only to drift. Let the imagined warmth of clay cups and bitter tonics carry you gently down. Let saffron dreams twirl like candlelight behind your eyelids. There's nothing more to learn tonight. No herbs to name, no facts to memorize. Just the rhythm of your breath, the hush of old world kitchens, and the deep permission to sleep. Now, we descend into a place that smells faintly of sheep, rye porridge, and poorly buried secrets. Your average medieval village. You would never think that cheating on your spouse could result in horn hats, public pig chases, and improvised morality plays. But here we are. The good news, you're technically still alive. The bad news, your neighbors saw you sneak behind the bakehouse with the blacksmith's widow, and now you're community property. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I'd love to know what corner of the world we're dozing off in together. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a thatched roof cottage, in a bed made of straw and domestic regret. Chickens wander in and out like they own the place, which, spiritually, they do. Word is already spreading through the narrow, muddy lanes. Someone's been unfaithful, and it might be you, or your neighbor, or the local Reeves daughter, in a village of 50 people and 0 secrets. You could sneeze near someone else's spouse, and it'd be written in the moral ledger by dawn. Cheating isn't just a sin here. It's a spectator sport. The village doesn't have Netflix. It has you and your very poor life decisions. People gossip at the communal well, fingers pointing, theories flying. He was seen slipping into Maud's barn, someone says, while another swears on their goat's grave that it was the priest who looked guilty. Children carry whispers like medieval couriers of chaos. Nothing escapes the surveillance of bored peasants with too much hay and not enough privacy. The church, predictably, gets involved. Because nothing screams repentance like being summoned to kneel on cold stone while a robed man shouts biblical threats at your forehead. If you're lucky, you'll be told to fast for a week. If you're less lucky, they'll get creative. One common punishment, being forced to crawl through town with a sign around your neck that says something like, "I lay with a stranger. Now, I lie with the shame." All while livestock look on with what you can only assume is judgment. And remember, it's not just the cheater who gets humiliated. Sometimes the whole couple is paraded around. In some regions, a wronged husband might be made to carry his cheating wife through the streets as a symbol of forgiveness. Symbolic, yes. dignified, not even slightly. Historians still argue whether these punishments were rooted in moral enforcement or just a brilliant excuse to break up the agricultural monotony. Imagine hoeing barley all morning and then being told, "Quick, Ethel's being shamed for kissing the cooper. Bring your clogs and a turnip for the crowd." One documented fringe punishment, being tethered to a pig and forced to oink your confession. You read that right, because nothing says redemption like competitive livestock imitation. And if you think noblemen were spared, think again. In small villages, everyone's dirty laundry, literal and metaphorical, was scrubbed in the same freezing stream. Nobility might dodge certain punishments, but not rumors. A philandering baron might end up in ballads sung by shepherds. Yes, cheating could make you immortal, in a folk song that rhymes mistress with blisters. So you shuffle through your day, wondering if your romantic misstep will earn you a stern sermon, a donkey ride, facing backward, or a catchy new nickname. Welcome to the village, where your love life is the main attraction, and justice smells vaguely like goat droppings. You're hoping for a quiet market morning, maybe buy a few turnips. Avoid any public humiliation, but the moment you step outside, it's clear today is a spectacle. Someone's been caught, again. And not just anyone, Edric, the miller, who until now had only ever cheated people out of flour. Not fidelity, but apparently, Edric has been grinding more than grain, and now, the town is assembling with all the moral enthusiasm of a pious mob and the wardrobe of a cabbage vendor. Public punishment in medieval villages wasn't exactly subtle. The tool of choice. The cucking stool, basically a wooden chair mounted on a lever and dunked in the river, used to punish scolds, nags, and adulterers, which basically meant anyone who annoyed someone in authority. Today, Edric gets the honor. He's strapped in like a soggy prize ham and dipped repeatedly into water that looks like it could birth frogs with postgraduate degrees. You watch as people cheer, toss turnips, and pretend this is justice and not a deeply entertaining break from thatching roofs. Someone's aunt is already narrating events like it's a play. Look at his face. That's the look of sin, stewed in regret, she declares, full of pride and half a flask of ale. It's important to note, medieval punishments weren't really about correction. They were about display, about showing others what happens when you prioritize your love life over local grain quotas and arranged marriages. This was medieval reality TV. The ratings very high. The prizes, humiliation, and possibly a bladder infection. Meanwhile, Roman cities had a different strategy. Less turnip throwing, more law and contract drama. Cheating was considered a personal betrayal and a legal violation. Roman husbands could legally kill their wives' lovers so long as the affair happened under their own roof. You read that right. In ancient Rome. Infidelity law was a fun little mix of domestic boundaries and conditional manslaughter. Historians still argue whether this was to uphold moral values or just a convenient loophole to settle scores with rivals. But the Romans also loved a good inscription. Cheating scandals sometimes made it onto tombstones or walls. One surviving example describes a woman who was chaste. Except on Tuesdays, you can almost hear the stonecutter judging silently with every tap of his chisel. And then there were the masks, literal wooden masks, forced onto accused women, sometimes carved with long noses or animal features. A cheating wife might be made to wear a pig mask and sit in the market square, symbolizing her moral transformation into livestock. This wasn't just punishment. It was branding. It said, "Buy onions here." But don't forget that love is dangerous and pigs are forever. Back in the village, Edric emerges from his final dunk, drenched and redeemed-ish. The crowd disperses. Children mimic his soggy waddle, and a few people already wonder who'll be next. Because the truth is, people cheat. And in a time with no texting, no Netflix, and no personal space, romantic drama was the closest thing to modern entertainment. So, you return home, not quite reassured. Your turn might come, or you'll be forced to throw turnips at someone else's shame parade. Either way, the next scandal is always simmering and the village already smells like smoke and anticipation. You're walking through town hoping for quiet, but of course, today is court day, which means the entire square smells like anticipation, baked dirt, and the distinct moral superiority of people who definitely have secrets of their own. At the center of the square is the punishment post, and tied to it, a man with his pants still on, but not his dignity. He's been accused of adultery, which in this case doesn't just mean sneaking off with someone else's spouse. It means violating a social contract that involves goats, dowries, and the shared ownership of 2 goats and a plow. Today's punishment shaming, the theatrical sibling of justice. And it starts with charivari. You've never heard a sound quite like it, pots, pans, clanking chains, and what might be a broken flute, basically. Every object that's ever offended a sleeping villager is now part of the ensemble. This raucous performance is paraded outside the accused's home, sometimes for hours. And no, this isn't just a party. It's an acoustic form of emotional torment. Historians still argue whether charivari was meant more for moral correction or just collective mischief, because honestly, there's a blurry line between justice and a very enthusiastic block party. Either way, the man at the post has clearly endured a full episode of sonic punishment. And now comes phase 2, symbolic dressing. Someone's put a giant set of donkey ears on his head. Another person ties a wooden yoke around his neck, loaded with symbolic items, 1 shoe for his betrayal, a dead chicken for unknown metaphorical reasons, and a cabbage, probably because no punishment is complete without one. In medieval villages, the idea was to turn your crime into a joke, but one that everyone had to laugh at except you. Public mockery wasn't just therapy for the offended spouse. It was entertainment, bonding ritual, and moral instruction all in one. You watch a group of teenagers reenact the donkey ear dance nearby, as if TikTok existed in the form of interpretive mime. Over in ancient Rome, though, shaming had legal teeth. If you were a woman accused of adultery, especially from a high-status family, you might be marched through the streets, stripped of your dowry, and legally disowned. Roman fathers even had the right to kill both the daughter and her lover in certain circumstances. You might think that's extreme, but Romans were all about order. And cheating disrupted the very Roman concept of virtus, a blend of manliness, discipline, and moral seriousness that could apparently be undone by one candlelit tryst. But not every punishment was bloody. Some were just creative. One record describes a man sentenced to sweep the forum, wearing only a woman's tunic, while reciting a legal oath backwards. Another was forced to host a feast for the entire neighborhood while being forbidden to eat a bite. Because nothing says don't cheat, like hangry regret served on stone plates, back in the village, the donkey-eared man has been released, his walk home followed by goats and gossip. The donkey ears will come off, but the nickname won't. From this day on, he'll be Ears, and every time he tries to flirt, someone will make braying noises. Justice is swift, but mockery is forever. You'd think that once the shame parade ends, the village would move on. But no, now it's time for the corrective rituals. Because apparently, the only thing worse than adultery is failing to turn it into a teaching moment. You find yourself squatting by the fountain as a neighbor whispers about the latest punishment, public bed reconsecration. Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. No, it's not as romantic as it sounds. In certain parts of medieval France and Germany, if a couple wanted to reconcile after one had strayed, the local clergy and sometimes half the village would supervise the ceremonial re-blessing of their shared mattress. This sacred rectangle of straw and sweat was carried through the streets, with villagers tossing petals or, more often, cabbage leaves, because why not? They're cheap, symbolic, and slightly insulting. The couple would then lie on this bed, fully clothed, thankfully, with hands tied together, while a priest read psalms about virtue, patience, and the horrors of lust. Meanwhile, peasants watched and nodded solemnly, as if this deeply awkward display proved something about moral restoration. Historians still argue whether these rituals were sincerely spiritual or just a last-ditch village attempt to control scandal using rope and scripture. In ancient Rome, reconciliations were less floral and more transactional. If the husband chose to forgive his wife, he had to publicly state that she had repented and taken a moral bath metaphorically, not literally, because Roman hygiene had its own issues. But there was a catch: the woman's father might lose legal claims to her dowry, depending on who forgave whom and how public the admission was. So, reconciling wasn't just about feelings. It was real estate negotiation disguised as moral maturity. Still, reconciliation had its perks, mainly not getting exiled, executed, or forced to wear symbolic cabbage on your chest. Back in the village, you watch as the couple walks home from the ritual bed procession, a little too stiffly, as if both are dying from secondhand embarrassment. Children giggle, grandmothers shake their heads, and someone's already carving the event into the church bench for posterity. Sometimes. The accused was forced to perform a penance play, a solo act in the middle of the square involving costumes, self-deprecating song, and an exaggerated reenactment of their betrayal using vegetables as props. It sounds like dinner theater. It was not. It was reputation CPR in burlap clothing. One man once reenacted his entire affair using a turnip for himself and a rutabaga for his mistress. It brought the house down. And by house, we mean the tavern. You can't help but notice the sheer performative energy of it all. Justice was less about fairness and more about drama, like medieval reality television. Except no one gets voted off, just publicly humiliated until morale improves. And people say the Middle Ages were dark. Even the concept of forgiveness became a public act. You had to prove it through rituals that were more awkward than sincere, turning private pain into public theater. And if the couple failed to reunite after all that cabbage and chanting, then the next punishment was exile, or worse, remarriage, to someone chosen by the village council. So, what happens when reconciliation fails? Simple. You pack your things well, your one wooden bowl and a goat, and prepare for public shunning. Not exile. No, that would be too swift. You're not banished, you're ignored, which, in a tightly packed medieval village with 6 houses, 2 pigs, and 1 water source, is actually more devastating than it sounds. The punishment of shunning was both petty and deeply efficient. You could still live in the village, but no one would speak to you, help you, or even acknowledge your existence. Need firewood, chop it yourself. Sick cow, hope you're good at veterinary improv. Want bread? The baker will look through you like a ghost with terrible morals and not enough coin. In Roman cities, it played out differently, less icy silence, more sarcastic graffiti. If your infidelity was particularly scandalous, someone might carve a delightful message near the bathhouse wall. Something like Lucilla shares more than olives, or Felix has 2 wives and 1 brain. Historians still argue whether these were actual punishments or just recreational roasting. Either way, reputations in ancient Rome crumbled under the weight of a well-placed scribble. Back in the village, things escalated with what we'd now call symbolic shaming installations. You wake one morning to find a wooden effigy hanging near your door, an exaggerated version of your face, grinning like a mischievous potato, with a ribbon that reads, "This one cheats." It's not legally binding, but your social standing just plummeted faster than a medieval chicken falling off a fence. And just when you think it can't get worse, enter the rough music. This was a glorious blend of percussion, cruelty, and community bonding. The villagers would gather outside your house at night with pots, pans, bells, and anything else that made noise. Then they'd perform a raucous musical piece, tailored just for you, often accompanied by rude lyrics or chants like "Baker bakes with more than flour." You couldn't sleep, you couldn't hide, and you definitely couldn't escape the beat. In some areas, your punishment came in edible form. If you were caught cheating, the village might deliver a large, unsalted loaf of betrayer's bread. It was about as dry as your current social prospects. You'd be expected to eat it in front of others. A culinary walk of shame. The crust blackened to resemble your soiled soul. The center hollow, like your moral core. But perhaps the most terrifying punishment of all, forced seating. You're made to sit in the scold's chair, a stiff, uncomfortable wooden throne placed right in the town square. There you sit for hours, holding a sign that confesses your crimes, while children poke you with sticks and elders offer unsolicited marriage advice. It's part time out, part live theater, part cautionary tale. Tourists, well, merchants loved it, of course. If the unfaithful party had enough wealth or status, they might escape these humiliations altogether. Nobles weren't immune to scandal, but their consequences were usually whispered, not shouted. They got private shame, sealed letters, and awkward dinner parties. You get percussion therapy and a haunted loaf of bread, and still, you can't help but marvel at the creativity. There's a weird brilliance in how communities turned moral judgment into folk art. Every punishment, no matter how absurd, was a symbol, a warning, a group effort. It was justice by committee, with a flair for theater and a complete disregard for personal dignity. Just when you thought medieval punishment couldn't get more bizarre, we enter the realm of props. Not real weapons or instruments of torture. No, that would be too predictable. We're talking vegetables, costumes, painted donkeys, and elaborate wooden contraptions that made your embarrassment both public and unforgettable. Let's begin with the humble cabbage. In some regions, adulterers were paraded around the village with a massive cabbage tied around their neck, like a pendant of shame. Why cabbage historians still argue whether this was a symbol of moral rot, a culinary insult, or simply because cabbages were available and heavy. Either way, it's hard to maintain dignity when your bling is a leafy brassica. Roman cities, of course, had their own prop game. The fasces, a bundle of rods carried by lictors, symbolized authority. But when it came to personal disgrace, you might instead be gifted a wooden phallus. Yes, that's right. A literal, sculpted, oversized symbol of your overactivity. Sometimes it was worn like a pendant. Other times paraded in front of your house. Subtlety, never heard of it. But let's return to the countryside, where creativity thrived alongside potatoes and passive aggression. If your affair was particularly scandalous, the town might organize a mock wedding between you and a pig. You'd be marched in circles around the village square, while a pig, gussied up in ribbons, oinked beside you like your unwilling betrothed. It was symbolic, humiliating, and surprisingly well attended. Bring your own turnips. There was also the dreaded cheater's yoke, a heavy wooden frame placed around your shoulders, often decorated with painted symbols, broken hearts, crying babies, or tiny devils. You'd be made to walk from house to house, apologizing to each resident like a very sad, morally compromised caroler. Bonus points if they pelted you with stale bread, which, let's be honest, was most bread back then. Occasionally, the props extended into live performance. Communities would stage little morality plays based on your scandal. Imagine puppets reenacting your adultery, complete with high-pitched voices, in tiny wooden beds. The puppet show might end with your puppet self being thrown into a toy pond or stomped by a righteous goose. The message was clear: fidelity matters. And so does puppet theater. Roman cities had a more artistic, but no less brutal approach. Murals. If you were wealthy and shameless, someone might paint your romantic failings on a wall. Not just graffiti, but full-on narrative frescoes. You and your lover, mid-affair, rendered in questionable proportions with exaggerated facial expressions. It's like a medieval comic strip starring you, and guess what? The public gets free viewing, daily, even in the courtroom. Props made an appearance. One record from the 14th century mentions a trial where the accused had to carry a symbolic sack labeled trust, and then publicly rip it in half. The trial ended with villagers sewing it back together while chanting things like, "Mend your ways and stitch your soul." It's emotional theater with a needle and thread. The props weren't just punishment, they were memory. A lingering visual gag that etched your mistake into the minds of your neighbors. And in communities where history lived more in storytelling than parchment, props were the glue. They were artifacts of gossip, heirlooms of humiliation, and sometimes, if repurposed, a cabbage stew the next day. So no, you couldn't just cheat and sneak away. You cheated, and the town turned it into an art installation. You betrayed, and someone painted your donkey. You lied, and the puppet troupe went on tour. Forget the stocks. True medieval justice came with glitter, pig weddings, and emotional cabbages. If props were the stage, then village festivals were the theater, and what better time to publicly humiliate someone than during a feast, right before everyone digs into roast goose and diluted wine. Welcome to the annual tradition of turning your affair into an awkwardly choreographed parade with drums, shouting children, and absolutely no privacy. Let's say your secret romance has just been exposed, perhaps thanks to an overly curious goat, or the fact that your love letters were accidentally written on communal washing stones. Perfect timing. The Spring Plowing Festival is just around the corner. Instead of being shunned each or quietly, you're now the centerpiece of a symbolic ritual with the subtlety of a slap made of wet rye. You might be cast as the fertility fool, a real role in some celebrations, where you'd be dressed in patchwork rags and made to dance clumsily while villagers chanted rhymes about broken promises and wandering hearts. Your partner in crime, if equally caught, might be forced to wear a cowbell and moo when spoken to. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to purify the village or just entertain the kids. In Roman Saturnalia, a similar opportunity arose. This topsy-turvy holiday celebrated chaos and role reversal. Servants dined like masters, and social norms were temporarily flipped. The perfect time for public jabs. Poets would perform verses mocking specific citizens' you. For example, for loving both the wine and the neighbor's wife. And of course, everyone laughed, except you, because in Saturnalia, nothing was sacred, including your recent midnight visit to someone else's atrium. But don't worry, medieval villages had entire charivari parades just for you. A rough music procession, where pots, pans, and wooden clappers would be banged together as the villagers escorted you and your illicit partner through the streets on a donkey, or worse, backwards on a cart, while hurling insults that would make a monk blush. You were expected to smile and wave. Participation was mandatory. Dignity was not. Sometimes the event concluded with a symbolic punishment. One particularly famous tradition, the cuckold's horns. These were enormous wooden antlers worn like a crown, signifying that your partner had strayed and now you were spiritually part deer. This wasn't a one-time gag. You might wear them for weeks, especially if your community believed your silence had somehow enabled the affair. And yes, children were allowed to decorate the horns with colorful ribbons. The logic behind these public performances wasn't just moral shaming, it was community control. In tight-knit medieval towns, where written law was loose and justice was a team sport, festival rituals let people blow off steam, point fingers, and re-establish social order. Through cabbage, puppets, and donkey parades, and in many cases, the cheating couple had to fund the entire show. That's right, you paid for the tambourines, the streamers, and the after-parade goat stew. Not unlike being billed for your own surprise party. Only this one ends with you crying in the stocks next to a guy dressed as a symbolic carrot. The truth is, festivals were just an excuse to gossip freely, to vent your frustrations, and to make sure everyone knew who'd broken the unspoken rules. And while some parts were silly, others could haunt you for years. Once you've been cast as the unfaithful jester in the village morality play, it's hard to go back to being just Thomas the Miller. So next time you hear medieval music and think of romance and candlelight, remember sometimes that lute was strumming a song about you and your cowbell-wearing lover. You would think that after the goose, the fish, the donkey, the bed parade, and the communal rhyming confessions. Things couldn't get more exhausting. But oh no, there's one last act in this tragicomic operetta exile, reinvention, or slow social extinction. You wake up the next day, not to bells or mobs, but to silence, which, in a medieval village, is a much worse sound. People don't speak to you, or if they do, it's only to correct your moral compass with performative concern. The baker forgets your order. The tavern suddenly runs out of ale when you walk in. Children point and whisper behind bundles of firewood. You've become less a person, more a walking cautionary tale. Not even the town pig wants to be seen with you. In some towns, you're politely asked to leave. In others, not so politely. Historians still argue whether this slow freeze-out was an organized system or just a spontaneous social immune response. Either way, it works. You either pack your things and seek a new town willing to ignore your reputation, or you stay and become a shadow unmarriable, unemployed, and uninvited. Roman cities, for all their concrete glamour, weren't much better. If you were an upper-class woman caught in adultery, your entire social network might collapse overnight. Parties canceled. Marriage prospects gone. Even your slaves might look at you differently, which says a lot considering Roman ethics. And if you were the man caught seducing someone else's wife, well, you might avoid death, but you definitely earn yourself a new name in the public graffiti, Loverus Maximus, but not in a good way. The strangest part, some punishments were performatively reversed if the affair was forgiven. Yes, if your spouse decided to accept you back, you had to publicly rejoin society in another cringeworthy ritual. One French record describes a man being paraded through town in a giant cradle, symbolizing his rebirth as a faithful husband. Witnesses reported the event as both tragic and hilarious. Honestly, the perfect medieval tagline. And then came the rumors. Oh, the rumors. If you tried to quietly move on, people just got more creative. You could be celibate for a decade and still get blamed when someone's goat went missing. Because that's how public shame works, it lingers like the smell of dried fish and injustice. But perhaps the most ironically cruel punishment of all was nothing. In some cases, no bell, no fish, no exile. Just the slow rot of social disdain. People smiling to your face but whispering at the well. You remain in the village, but your name is no longer spoken in songs or stories, only in side glances. You're not even interesting enough to humiliate anymore. You've graduated into historical footnote status, and in the end, that's what medieval justice was really about. Not balance, not fairness, but visibility, to be seen, judged, ridiculed, and then quietly erased. You take your final walk through the square, barefoot, reputation in tatters, and realize the show is over. The bells stopped ringing. The donkey's gone home. The fish is, well, probably still somewhere nearby. But you've served your time. And tomorrow, the village will need a new scandal. And now, the bells fade. The donkey quiets. The goose, mercifully, stops staring at you with that knowing judgment in its glass eyes. The crowd, once so animated in its righteous cruelty, drifts back to their routines, baking, weaving, gossiping, forgetting. You, dear listener, are left not in stocks or shame, but in soft sheets. The only noise, now a gentle hush, a closing sigh from centuries past. So let yourself drift. Let the rituals and rhymes dissolve. You are no longer on the fish cart or tangled in village spectacle. You are safe in this moment, wrapped in stillness. Whatever sins you carried in medieval times, they can stay there. Tonight, you've made it out. Perhaps not clean, but at peace. Sleep well, my scandalous time traveler. The show is over. The lights are down, and the world is finally quiet.